this is something we haven't seen before, and that was players opting out, sitting out 2020. I'm not faulting any of them for opting out, but it's interesting that now Penei Sewell scheduled to go in the top 10. Jamar Chase, even Trey Lance, I know he played the one game, but for all intents and purposes, he didn't play in 2020 either. Is that, I don't want to say caution or worrisome, but should that give maybe some teams pause, or will there be a bigger learning curve in your mind making that jump because a few of these players did not play in 2020 or no?
I think that's a good point. It all depends on certain positions. Wide receiver, you're not really worried too much about it because you can still work on your craft as a route runner and catching a football without playing the game. So you're still safe there. But for someone like Penei Sewell or even Trey Lance, you kind of take a hesitance. And just to take Trey Lance out of the equation, talk about Jamie Newman, who didn't play this year and was trekking in the right direction. Had he played this year, you'd probably be talking about him as another first-round talent. But because he didn't play, and his first game was in the Senior Bowl where he had an up-and-down week, it kind of hurt him that we didn't see that year of development. And for Penei Sewell, the last time we saw him, he was, 19 years old?
Yeah.
And so he missed a gap year of his development. So you don't know what he's able to do now. The last time you saw him, he was 19 years old, and you're taking him high in a league that has legit grown men and grown man strength guys playing up front. So it's a bit of a risk for a guy playing offensive line, for a guy playing quarterback, more so than someone playing corner or wide receiver.
Jamar Chase, I don't really, whatever team takes, I don't really see, to your point, receiver getting too impacted by sitting out or not. But I'm glad you brought up Penei Sewell because that is a guy that, you're right, for the most part, consensus top tackle taken, probably most likely, unless a dramatic drop happens, will go in the top 10. But to your point, right, it's because his success was when he was so young. I think that's a position, maybe the player specifically that, again, not that you're concerned, but I feel like could have the biggest potential for a rust factor or a slow start to his NFL career, just because, like I said, tackle, when you're going against the NFL, it's such a dramatic shift. You lose that, possibly strength or whatever. I just think that, right, Penei Sewell is the kind of guy you look at maybe the most impacted by not playing in 2020. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so because, again, you lose that physical contact. You can't simulate that in workout. Wide receiver, cornerback, you can simulate that. Running back, you lose a year of body contact, so you can't really simulate that. But, O-line, D-line, you really need to get that physical contact to really get better in certain areas. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes and how much the room he has to develop.
How about defensive players, Emory? Right? They don't get enough love. We're talking in this draft a lot about quarterbacks. We're talking about Kyle Pitts go to number 4 to the Falcons. That's always a big question. We don't talk a lot about defensive players. When you look at this draft, who do you think is the first player to go off the board? Is it Micah Parsons? Is it Patrick Surtain? Which way do you think, defensive-wise, first player that we hear their name called?
Well, I think we'll see cornerbacks start to go off the board first because they seem to be in plenty abundance of talent there. Corners nowadays, you got wide receivers, you got traditional base sets or 3 wide receiver sets, and there are teams that are trotting out 3 number 1 receivers, in those formations or personnel groups. And so you got to have cornerbacks that can cover. And if you got some premier guys in the draft, which this draft has, your Surtains, your Horns, your Cameron Bynums and those type guys, and Newsom, all these guys that you talk about, if you're able to grab one and help yourself out, I think that's a good bet. Even if you're Atlanta, you took a A.J. Terrell last year who started to get better toward the back end of the season. You took him in the first round. You're sitting there 4. I would be hard-pressed to pass up on a guy like Patrick Surtain. You're in a division where you got tremendous talent at wide receiver across the board. You got to be able to match up. And if you're able to match up with 2 guys that can take away your top 2 options and kind of force you to go to your 3rd option or 4th option in the passing game, that's a win for the defense. So, there are teams that got a lot of, tough decisions to make in terms of personnel groupings. But cornerback, to me, is right up there with, quarterback in terms of how you have to match up now. Just like when teams say, hey, we got to get, we have these quarterbacks that are able to run. We got to get fast defensive linemen that could chase these quarterbacks around. Okay, well, you got wide receivers that are legit coming out polished and ready to go. We got to get guys that can cover these guys, and that pushes that premium up more so than anything. So I think if you're Atlanta or a team that's thinking about taking a position player early in the draft outside of a quarterback, cornerback probably would. I think we'll see a run on cornerback early in this draft because of the type of talent, the type of game that's played today.